Every year, the first Sunday following Epiphany Day, January 6th, is Baptism of the Lord Sunday in the Christian calendar. Now, there are a lot of Christian feast days in the calendar that we Mennos never observe, like the Nativity of St. John the Baptist, or St. Joseph's Day, or Candlemas, or Feast of Holy Innocents, and many others. There are other Christian feasts that we always observe, at least here at Parkview: Christmas, Easter, Pentecost, All Saints' Day, and many more. And then we have the hit and miss feast days: Christ the King Sunday, Ascension Day, the Baptism of the Lord. Depending on what else is going on at the time, we might or might not mark that day. We celebrate Baptism of the Lord Sunday probably half the time, which I've decided is not enough. I usually have two thoughts when I think about setting aside a whole Sunday to focus on Jesus' baptism. The first, and usually fleeting thought, is why bother with this one brief moment in the Jesus story? No miracle performed, no sick person healed, no profound lesson taught, no doctrine established. Just a vague description of a mystical experience, a voice from heaven, and maybe a vision, depending on which gospel account you read, dove descending, sound of thunder, or a deep voice saying, "This is my Son, the Beloved." Establishing this as a Christian feast day sounds a little like the Church Fathers seizing on an opportunity to reinforce the doctrine of the Trinity. Jesus is proclaimed God's Son, the Spirit dove descends, and the Father speaks from heaven. All three right there. But those dismissive thoughts don't stay with me long, because I remember what follows in the Jesus story, and how crucial this moment really is, and how relevant it is for our ordinary day-to-day lives as disciples of Jesus in the 21st century. Yes, that's what I said. This mystical and slightly woo-woo biblical scene, I'm saying, is practical, contemporary, and relevant to Mennonites who generally focus on more down-to-earth matters like being Jesus' disciples. And I would add, even more so at the beginning of 2017, this story is relevant to our lives when our way of being in the world is challenged on many fronts. When our wider church is facing fractious conflict, when our culture is more polarized than ever, when our national politics is in disarray, when broad swaths of our culture operate on high anxiety and fear almost constantly, when violence is around every corner, when the health of our planet is in serious jeopardy, now is the time, and urgent is the need, to get clear about who we are as the people of God. No better place to look for help in that than Jesus' baptism by John in the Jordan River. Now, why would I make such an odd claim? Because of what I believe about baptism. This ancient practice is, to my thinking, the most important one in the life of the church. And it's the one we get most confused about. There have been all kinds of debates about baptism over the years, more than debates, wars, violence. We Anabaptists know this. My 11th great-grandfather, Hans Landis, was beheaded in Zurich, Switzerland, over what he believed about baptism. Churches have split over when to baptize, what words to speak when baptizing, how much water is needed, and on and on. Most of those fights and splits and executions are old history. That's not the kind of confusion about baptism that worries me. The most common problem today is that we gut baptism of its real and thick meaning, and we make it into something thin and sentimental. Now, we had some beautiful baptisms here at Parkview this past September. Beautiful on many levels. It was a cool, clear Sunday on the North River in Bridgewater. The 4 young women being baptized were full of joy. They were surrounded by loving family, supportive friends. A little disappointed there was no voice from heaven or descending doves, but there were ducks in the river. The birds were singing, the water was invigorating. The towels wrapped around them on the shore brought warmth and comfort. Many pictures were taken to mark the occasion. Facebook was abuzz when some of them were posted, people far and wide offering their love and prayers and congratulations. That was great. It was all beautiful, all memorable, but it wasn't the most significant part of that day. I'll get to that in a moment. But let me say first, I think many contemporary Christians misunderstand baptism to be just a personal rite of passage, something we carefully stage to make memorable and picturesque. I don't mean that's what we did in September. I don't think we did. But I am saying it's a pretty common view among American Christians that a beautiful and memorable baptism is somehow better, more effective than an ordinary one. That's the same kind of thinking that says a big, beautiful wedding is more significant than a small and simple one. Now, I'm a genuine lover of beauty who's willing to pay extra for things with aesthetic value, who goes out of the way to find and appreciate beauty. Let me say, I love beautiful weddings and beautiful baptisms. I support efforts to make them beautiful. I love seeing people get into the moment and extracting from those moments all the goodness and beauty that they can. But while a baptism can be aesthetically beautiful, it is so much more than that. In terms of what it actually means and what it does, it doesn't make one whit of difference if you were immersed in the Jordan River under a rainbow and have a DVD to remember it by, with harp music on the soundtrack, or if you had some water poured on you with a little plastic pitcher kneeling in front of a drab Mennonite sanctuary with no worship arts and cinder block walls and barely remember it because you were 12 years old. I'll make you guess which of those two scenarios is mine. The fact of the matter is baptism is not about a personalized, individualized experience. It's about your identity as an individual in community. It's not about where your baptism is located, it's about where your baptism locates you. Take Jesus' baptism as a prototype. His baptism and ours share important elements. So why was Jesus baptized? Why was it necessary? Even John the Baptist wondered and objected at first to doing it. And it was not to wash his sins away or to cleanse him or forgive him of his wretched human nature. No, it was the day that Jesus took on a new name. He was rechristened. At the moment he came up out of the water, a voice from heaven pronounced his name. You are my Son, the beloved, in whom I'm well pleased. God spoke a resounding yes to Jesus, and in submitting to baptism, Jesus spoke a resounding yes to the beckoning of the Spirit. It was at that moment that Jesus threw in his lot with his God and God's people and God's purposes, and he was rechristened, renamed. There's only one person who has the right to name him and to call out his identity, the one who gave him life, his heavenly parent. You know, the most important sentence a parent can speak to a child begins with the words, "You are." Not "you should," or "you oughta," or "you will," but "you are." The words that come after "you are" can build up or tear down. They can create life or destroy life. But words that articulate our identity are the most important and powerful words a parent can speak. In baptism, God is the first one speaking. It was true for Jesus. It was true for me in that cinder block sanctuary. It was true for the young women in the North River. In baptism, God says to us, "You are loved. You are mine. You are worthy because I have made you worthy. I am with you. I am for you. And I have an intention for you." It's not an accident that in the Gospels, the first event recorded after Jesus' baptism was an agonizing trial in the desert, where Jesus' new identity would be put to the test. The way the gospel story unfolds is intentional. Jesus is told by God, "This is who you really are." And the next moment, he is told by the great adversary, "You can be whoever you want to be." And the rest of his ministry journey, Jesus was pulled this way and that way by well-meaning friends who thought he should behave in a certain way, and to out-and-out enemies who tried to make him behave in another way. He had to keep going back to what he was told by the only one who had a right to lay claim to his identity. "No, this is who I am. And this is how I was intended to live." That's the function baptism should have for us. It's foundational to understanding who we are. We start by hearing God's yes. "You are my beloved. You belong to me and to my family. I am with you. I am for you. I have a purpose for you." And in baptism, we offer back our yes. "I am your child. I'm an integral part of your family. I am all in with your will and purposes for me and for the world." Yes. Once we hear God's yes and respond with our yes, we have a basis on which to act and to do and to behave. We have a foundation for ethics, for deciding between a right and wrong course for our lives. because we know who we are. I have to wonder whether all the chaos and conflict and confusion that seems to often get the upper hand in the church, in our community, in our political processes, in our national and global state of affairs, is because most of us are missing that essential grounding in life, hearing and believing those defining words from our Creator. You are my son, my daughter. I have given life to you. You belong to me, and I love you with an everlasting love. So many other things try to shape or reshape our identity, our national citizenship, our religious affiliation, our political convictions, our jobs, our money, our vehicles, our clothes, our body image, our sexual persona. And all these identities are foisted on us by a culture that makes idols out of these various identities and affiliations, and are reinforced by slick marketing of products that promise to give us all these different markers of worthiness. When our life choices are influenced more by these thin and fleeting identities, more than by our God-given identity as a beloved child of God, then we're not living the whole life that we were created to live. And all kinds of dysfunction results. We lash out in anger toward the other, those who are different, since we're not fundamentally clear and comfortable with who we are. That insecurity shows up in all kinds of unhealthy ways. In the most extreme cases, it results in violent behavior, even in mass attacks like we've seen recently. It's easy to write off attacks like the one that took place in Fort Lauderdale on Friday as isolated incidents by some deranged, poor individual whose wires got crossed in his brain. It's a little harder when we recognize those acts as an extreme expression that sits at one far end of the same continuum that includes everyday patterns of behavior that I too engage in, rooted in insecurity about my identity. Like when I separate myself from or disparage the other. Baptism is the best thing the church has going to set us on a different course. It locates us in a community that is on a journey with God in the world. In times of chaos and uncertainty, it reminds us of who we are and to accept and love who we are, so that we might love others with more courage and more integrity. I said I would come back to our baptism service in September to something more significant than that picturesque moment in the North River. A few hours earlier, those 4 women stood in front of you at Camp Brethren Woods. Whether you were actually there or not doesn't matter. That gathering of people represented and included you. They stood in front of you and gave voice to what was at the heart of that ritual. They said to you, in essence, by this act, we are saying yes to God, and we are locating our lives, our faith journey here with you, our sisters and brothers. So I leave you today with some of their words. I'm now directly quoting Asha, Genevieve, Jackie, and Lily. I want to publicly declare my love and trust in Jesus. I'm ready to fully commit to being part of this faith community. I invite you to challenge me and love me just as you already have been, and I will accept each challenge and return the love. When I find myself with more questions than answers, I will wrestle with them and struggle with them and explore them here with you. I'm not saying that I know all the answers. I'm saying that I want to join in community with this family of believers. I can't wait for this journey forward. Now, in response, let's sing together number 443 in the hymnal. It's a great, sturdy baptism hymn locating this ritual of the church in the death and resurrection of Jesus and in the living body of Christ, the church.